To Module 4's screen capture. This module is titled the Writing Workshop. So the writing process is something that all of you, I'm sure, have taken part of in one way or another since probably like third, fourth grade. But the writing workshop is an often overlooked but very important part of the writing process because we know what we intend to say. We know how much we might value our own arguments, but it's only when others look at what we've written with fresh eyes that we often realize that we haven't been as clear as we want to be or as convincing as we want to be. So, in this module, you will learn about how to integrate sources properly and avoid plagiarism. Very important. You'll also turn your focus towards giving and receiving written feedback and take part in a peer workshop. So there's two deliverables, meaning two things you submit for grading for this module. So the last week was a bit work heavy. This week is I mean, it's not a cake week, but it's a lighter week when it comes to the workload. So I'm sure you'll enjoy that. So reading, source integration. When you begin drafting your paper, you will be using information from sources as evidence to support your point. That is super crucial. You need to use evidence from your sources. That's maybe statistics, maybe a quotation, specific details though that very concretely illustrate the point you're trying to make, support the point you're trying to make, and you're going to follow that up with an explanation of how it supports the point you're trying to make. So, guidelines for quotations. When you quote a source, you use the exact words and phrases your source used to convey information. So plagiarism occurs when you quote when quotes are not attributed to the appropriate sources. So it is important that you keep careful notes so that you don't unintentionally represent someone else's work with your own ideas. This is something that I know for a long time they've tried to ingrain in students since middle school, where you read and you put it into your own words. But even still, if you are taking an idea from a work, even if you don't quote it word for word, but it's not your idea, you still want to attribute the proper credit to that source. So plagiarism occurs when quotes are not attributed, as I said. So overquoting can also be problematic. This happens when writers rely too heavily on quotations. The problem there is your voice is lost. Your argument is not the central focus of the paper when you overquote. So you want to use quotes selectively. You don't want to use a very long quotation unless you intend to analyze each aspect of it. You want to just use part of the quotation that really supports what you're trying to say, and you only want to quote when you really couldn't capture it or say it nearly as well. When something about how it's said really is important, then you would quote. So the following graphic review tips for successfully integrating quotations into your writing. These tips, I think they're excellent. So I would definitely look over this part very closely, and I would, as best as you can, commit them to memory because these are good general guides for any class that is going to require you to do any level or length of research and to write about it. So I know you guys can read, so I'll let you read that. If you have any questions about any of these six, just ask me on Wednesday. So, introduction to summarizing. Why summarize? Students are often tempted to draw quotations from their research sources to support points they want to make. Well-chosen quotations from respected authorities can indeed be valuable evidence. However, too many quotations break up the flow of your writing, so you should use them only when the phrasing is unique, memorable, and particularly powerful, as I stated earlier. So if you can capture it in your own words, you can paraphrase it, and it's equally as powerful. Do that. It's not only a lot easier to integrate your own words into your writing because the rest of it is your own words. It's a good practice to do. So it's easier, and it's good to do. Now that said, I would never write a paper on about Shakespeare's tragedies and try to paraphrase "to be or not to be." That is the question, because it's unique, memorable, and particularly powerful. Um, but you shouldn't say like Dr. Bob Jones says, comma space quotes, smoking causes cancer. That there's nothing very unique, memorable, or particularly powerful about the phrasing of it, even though the truth that it captures might be powerful. But you could paraphrase that. Um, when you take notes from your reading, it's a good idea to use your own vocabulary and phrasing because so many times students, very well intentioned, will end up plagiarizing because the words that the author used stick in the student's head. Then all of a sudden, the student has a word or two or three that kind of leap out because the rest of the words aren't quite like that. And it can cause questions about plagiarism. So just make sure that your writing captures you as the author and captures your voice. And a good way to do that when taking notes is to do just what it says here. And it gives you reasons why it's good to follow their suggestions. But again, I'll let you read those because we've already kind of hit on those already in this screen capture. Then how to write a summary. That might sound kind of silly because you might think, I know how to write a summary. I've been doing that for eons. But this is more unique to, or particular to, a research paper at the college or university level. In brief, your summary should cover the same ground as the original passage, but it should not contain any direct quotations. That's key. You don't, if you're summarizing something, you want to capture all those critical elements, but you don't want to accidentally incorporate quotations, which is why up here, again, using your own vocabulary phrasing is recommended. And right here is an important point. Unknowing plagiarism occurs when summaries are phrased too closely to source materials, so be sure the phrasing is sufficiently different. So it's not just quoting word for word without attributing it to a source, but just having your phrasing be too close to the original without it just raises red flags and it can cause headaches that aren't necessary. So a good practice is to just follow the suggestions that they've given you in this module. It's a really helpful module, not just for this class, but for this class and beyond. A good summary will make the following information clear to the reader: where you found the source, the fact that you are summarizing a source rather than presenting your own ideas or opinions, etc. You can read the rest of it, but it's so essentially you are going to either be quoting directly, which you want to do very sparingly, or you'll be paraphrasing, or you'll be summarizing. It all depends on kind of how much you want to capture and how best capturing it will serve you in your paper. So steps writing a summary again, they go step by step. Synthesis. In your paper, you'll be synthesizing information from many sources in order to support your project. You saw in the previous module that this isn't the sort of paper where you can just have one source. You need to have multiple sources that are high quality sources. And what they mean by synthesizing is you're going to be taking all this information that you get from these sources, and if there's commonalities between information in different sources, meaning you can use information from like source A and source B to support the same point, you're going to be synthesizing those together. For example, you might say, Researcher Bob Jones found in his 1999 groundbreaking study that unicorns are real, and then you would attribute that fact, and then 10 years later, in 2009. Maria Adams followed up his study with a more a broader in scope one of her own, and she too came to the same conclusions that unicorns are real. Of course, I'm making this up, it's silly, but you get the idea. You use different sources, synthesize them together, and in this case, you're using one piece of evidence and the other to build off of it in order to help really get your point across. So, and it says here, the term synthesis may scare you if you haven't heard it before, but it's what I said there, and I think if you listen to that example again, the one that I gave, you'll hopefully it'll calm you, because all of you are very capable of synthesizing your sources. So the down here they have a summary, fact base, and then synthesis, evaluation, informed opinion, based facts. They have Black Swan and they have East Coast Grill. So you can read through that, and it'll give you another example to kind of flesh out what they mean. This page here, I think, is super, super helpful, super important in my opinion, because if you can get this down, you can write body paragraphs for almost any paper, for any class, at the undergrad level, at the master's level. It's essentially, these are the ingredients you need for a good, high quality analytical paragraph. You want to open the paragraph by clearly stating the point you want to make in that paragraph. That point that you're making in that paragraph should be one of the pillars, one of the key points that, when combined, all go together to bolster your argument, to support your argument, to defend and develop your thesis statement. Information, that's the evidence. You want to include some context leading into the information, but Pie didn't have the same ring as pie. Context is just giving the reader important information before they get the evidence, like if the originator of the information is very important because they're highly respected, or anything that you think the reader should have, that they should know going into the evidence, you could include in the context. But information, that's the evidence portion. And then explanation, sometimes called analysis, that is where you explain how this information supports this point that you open the paragraph with. So down here they give you a good example. Well, it's I think a clear example. All right, activity, integrating sources, graded. This activity will be graded based on completion. So this is one that the system will grade. It's just going to have you put into practice what they just discussed in the previous pages in this module. There's a review of the Pie method. That's what we just talked about on the previous page. Point, information, explanation. And so review the sources and select a source that will support a key point in your essay. In 1 to 2 sentences, clearly state what the point is that you're trying to make in this particular section. So if your overall stance is that we must ban genetically modified organisms, or we must produce nothing but genetically modified organisms, you would have sub-arguments, sub-claims that would all go together to support that. So it's asking here for one of those sub-arguments. You provide the point here in 1 to 2 sentences. You provide the information, which is the evidence from the source, very specific evidence from a source. It says what information from the source you selected in step 1 supports this point. So you'd identify the source here, state the claim that you're trying to support in that paragraph, just the paragraph, if you were to write a whole paragraph here. The information that comes from this source that supports this point, and then explanation. You're going to explain how the information provided in question 3 supports the point that you wrote down in question 2. How does information also support the overall argument of the essay? So in the explanation, you don't want to just explain how the evidence supports the claim that you opened the paragraph with, but then you want to do a final tie back to the thesis statement, the overarching argument that the whole essay is about. It would be like a lawyer using fingerprints as evidence to they don't just say these fingerprints prove that he or she held this bat. They then link it back to the overall charge against the person that they're trying to prosecute. So if you think about it like that, it might make it a little bit clearer, maybe. And then finally, reading and video, workshopping writing. So you'll watch this video. It's another. Oh, actually, no. The previous one was from a different school. Sorry, but anyways, regardless, watch this video. It's good. Peter Elbow, he's a professor, English emeritus at UMass Amherst. He's a great guy. I've never met him, but I've read some of his work. So two sides of the workshop. So this outlines what the workshop is, what it will look like. I'm not going to read this to you because I believe that all of you have had some experience with workshopping. If I'm wrong, please let me know, and let's sit down and chat about it. But read through this first, even if you've never workshopped before. There's an interactive game, ungraded, for the workshop. It gets at how to give good feedback and not just say, I like this is neat, or I don't get this. Being more specific is how you're helpful to the author of the paper that you're workshopping. Discussion, annotations, and writing plan workshop. So now that you've finished watching a video on the workshopping process, let's put what you've learned into practice. On this page and on the next, you'll use a guide to help workshop one of your peers' submissions of assignment 1. So this is the annotations and writing plan that you just submitted for the previous module. It states in here exactly what you need to do. So again, I'm not going to read it to you because I think it's rather straightforward. If you have any questions, though, please let me know, because what is straightforward to one person is not to another, and that's fine. So, but I don't want to bore you by reading it if it is straightforward to you as well. So writing workshop, just as with every other assignment that has a rubric tied to it, I encourage you to read through here, making sure you hit on all the attributes that go with whatever column you're shooting for. If it were me, I would shoot for this column here, but I'm not going to tell you what to do. But the rubric is exactly what I use to assess this assignment, so there'll be no mystery there. Please let me know if you have any questions about anything on this rubric, though. All right, and so with that ends Module 4. I will see you folks on Wednesday.